Hey there, and welcome to the Fiihr Factor, a podcast that shines a light on real stories, smart strategies, and the occasional hard truth about running a business. Think of this as your quick dose of clarity before your first cup of coffee. Let's go. Today, I have the pleasure to interview Martin Lew. He's got an awesome company called Commtrex. And look, I love trains, first of all, and I see trains on your page, and I've looked into a little bit about what you do, but first of all, thanks for taking the time, Martin. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I think most people grow up loving trains, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with trains as a full-time gig.
That's awesome. So tell me about, how did you get into this thing?
Yeah, so I started Commtrex back in 2016, 17 timeframe. In a prior life, I actually went to law school to be a securities lawyer. And then getting close to graduation, I decided that I didn't want to practice law and I wanted to go into business. So my first job out of law school actually brought me to Houston, Texas to work on Bear Stearns trading desk. They started an energy trading platform called Bear Energy. And I was hired on to be the first originator for their coal and emissions trading desk. And shortly thereafter, JP Morgan acquired Bear in March of 2008. And I ended up staying with Bear with JP Morgan until about 2014-15 time period. But when I was at JP Morgan, we're moving 1 million tons of coal per year physically to generators across North America, and then also put it on a boat and getting it to buyers in Asia and Europe. And that was my exposure to rail. If you look at all the different commodities that move on rail by volume, coal historically has been the largest volume product. So because of that, I had a lot of interactions with all the different constituents and stakeholders, whether it be leasing companies, short lines, class ones, transloaders, everyone who was in that sort of ecosystem was a partner of mine. And at that time, I noticed that there was no very easy way to be able to connect with different rail served locations or service providers. So I was looking at all the different industries that they were on, particularly in transportation logistics. And it was very obvious to me that there had to be a better way to help shippers, which are the demand side of the ecosystem, to connect with the supply side. So to connect with the class ones, the short lines, terminals, ports, warehouses, and then leasing companies. And so the idea was to create the first digital platform that connects the supply and demand side of the railroad industry, so that if you're a shipper and you're looking to move any sort of, either it's a commodity or a container anywhere in US, Canada, or Mexico, you can go to one place, be able to identify all the different sort of locations for the product that you're moving. Number one, you could also lease cars, you can store cars, you can buy cars. But effectively, it was a one-stop shop, because the thesis relied on two basic tenets. Number one was there was this massive generational shift that was taking place. By the time you get to 2025, 75% of the global workforce will be millennials. So we're talking digital natives. Everyone's, grows up with iPhones and iPads in their hands. So they just fundamentally think about how they connect with other humans in a different way. And then number two, I knew that at some point down the line, AI would become pervasive and ubiquitous. It would become this technology that would be effectively changing how humans interact with each other. And at the core of AI is really sort of data, number one, and the ability to, effectively have all these distribution channels to be able to get to all these people. So I knew that between those two different sort of major catalysts, that every industry was going to have an aggregator to be able to bring together the supply and demand side. And I thought to myself, why not me? Why not, why don't I be able to take all the context and connections I have in the industry and then get all these folks onto a platform, so that one day, ultimately, we can become the sort of one-stop shop for all things related to rail logistics.
Wow. So okay. So you're in law school and you're like, I'm not doing this. So that had to make your parents happy.
Oh yeah. No, that's what every parent dreams, is that their kid go to pre-law and then pay a lot of money for law school, and then right before graduation decide that they don't want to practice. That's definitely a parent's dream. So that was a very difficult conversation, but with that said, my grandparents were entrepreneurs, and I come from a family full of lawyers and entrepreneurs. And they always knew that I had an entrepreneurial spirit. I started my first company when I was at USC undergrad. I started my first tech company, raised capital, built that company. And then I started another company when I was in law school. I partnered with a kid from MIT, and we actually become semifinalists in the MIT 50K. So, my family knew all along that there was an entrepreneurial sort of bug inside of me, and that was in my DNA. But I did promise them at minimum that I would make it through law school. So, I definitely sort of got them JD, just didn't end up practicing and ended up going to this different direction.
That's amazing. So it's also amazing you started these other two companies. When did you know was that modeled for you being an entrepreneur, or did you just like had this?
No, I grew up in it. So I grew up in Los Angeles. My grandparents ran a dry cleaning business. And so I grew up around them. It was a fairly large business, about 60 plus employees. And my grandparents, had other some small businesses and things that they were building. So I was just had a lot of exposure to what they were doing as entrepreneurs. And sometimes you just are in an environment where you're always being pushed to come up with different ideas, solve different problems. And because I was in that environment, number one, and number two, I think I was just sort of born with that natural sort of curiosity or inquisitiveness to figure out ways to solve problems. So, when I was in, high school, I went to a boarding school in San Diego. And when I was there, I was in military school. So I was running a company or an organization there, and I was coming up with ways to solve problems. And when I got to college, I saw another problem to solve and figured out that I can go raise capital, put a team together, and go out and start selling the idea. And then when I went to Boston College for law school, I also started one of the largest student organizations there called the BC Business and Law Society. I took the MBA program and JD, put them together because at the time I thought to myself, why isn't there an organization that helps students that don't want to practice law but want to, go into business, that's going to help us cultivate that sort of trajectory or path into a business sort of career versus a legal career. Just my whole life, I've always sort of, when I identify a problem and I figure out a way to solve it, I just go after it. I just have this sort of mentality that, if it's important a problem and there's really a sort of problem, a solution to it, that there's always a way to be able to figure out how to get people to sort of support or back the problem or back the solution and solve the problem. And, after you do it enough times, it becomes kind of more of a reflex. And so I just, thought to myself, well, why not come in and try to help sort of create this institution with this platform in the industry that ultimately could become a real force to help shippers move more freight by rail.
Yeah, that's awesome. So problem solving is your love language. Like that's what you love to do.
Right. Well, I'll be trying to solve problems. I'm not going to say I'm always successful at it, but definitely I always have solutions or different ways to be able to solve it. I always tell my kids that, if you don't have the answer to a problem, I said, there's definitely an answer out there. You just got to keep asking enough questions. And I always tell them that the questions are the answer. The more questions you ask, the closer you'll get to finding the problem. You just got to ask enough people the question. And to me, business is no different. You just got to ask customers, what problem are they surfacing or what are they dealing with? And the more you talk to them and sort of uncover what those issues are, there's always a simple way to solve very complex problems. Usually, in fact, that's typically the best way to solve a problem is not always the most complex solution. It's typically the most simple and easy solution. But it's a non-obvious thing that, you almost have to work through different iterations to figure it out. But just the very simple idea of creating a platform that connects the supply and demand side of an industry like railroading, to me, that seems like such an obvious sort of problem statement, but a very difficult thing to solve when you have a business or industry that's been around for over 180 years. Everyone knows each other. It's a strong network, and it's very much a closed off industry, because if you don't know rail, if you're not in the business, it's not something that most people understand. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you ask someone about the road industry, they're not going to understand it. Even in logistics supply chain, even people who live and breathe that world don't understand rail. So why not create an easier way for people to understand it? And then once they want to actually move freight by, you got to create a way for them to be able to make it easy for them to connect with the providers that could actually help them facilitate that move.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So I first of all wanted to capture the fact, because I love this that you mentioned, asking questions and getting really good at asking the right questions will get you to the real heart of a problem to be solved versus maybe more of like a symptom, right? Because you had to get down to the nitty gritty, like what are you trying to do, and what does ideal state look like? So then how do you take an industry like you mentioned, rail, and it being very kind of insular? How did you break through into, I mean, you knew the people, I guess, but how did you break through with this new concept of technology and get anybody to adapt it?
It's very, and this is just a general mental model. when you're thinking about solving, or when at least when I think about solving a problem, I tried to break it up into all the very smallest pieces and think, if I were to start with building block number one, what would be the first building block that, you can get buy into? Because at the end of the day, this is all about buying. You got to get other people to want to buy into it and help you solve the problem.
Yes.
So the initial problem that I tried to solve was leasing for rail cars. I went to myself and I said, well, there has to be an easier way to be able to lease cars, because traditionally, if you want to go lease rail cars from a large leasing company, you need to enter into a minimum 1 to 2 year contract. And the issue that you're going to run into as a shipper is, if you've never moved freight by rail, you don't want to take the risk on of a 1 to 2 year contract when you may be just shipping for 3 or 6 months and then it becomes out of the money, or doesn't make sense economically for you to continue to move freight by rail, or your customer doesn't want to take the product by rail. A lot of times when I was a trader, I would want to just do a 6 month, 8 month, or 10 month deal, but nobody wanted to offer me less than a 1 or 2 year lease. So my idea was, well, why don't we create a secondary market for folks that are long cars to be able to offer cars on a short-term lease basis to people who are short cars. So all you're doing is matching the longs and the shorts together. And the people who are long cars, typically, they don't just want to indefinitely get rid of the cars. They typically want to, if there's a shoulder period or there's some sort of downtime in their commodity, in that cycle that they have, or every commodity has a different cycle of where the demand is. And so when the off-peak months are on, why wouldn't they sublease it so they can optimize their assets, number one, and number two, they can also sort of be helping out someone else in the industry that could be moving those cars during that time. So it started out leasing because that seemed like a very obvious place to start. And then in a bull market, leasing would do well. In a bear market, storage would do very well. So the sort of analog, when we build lease, we're like, why don't we build also a rail car storage marketplace? And the non-obvious thing to me, but I knew there was a real sort of reason why to start with storage is, storage got us into the location business, meaning that started putting dots in the map for us. And those dots in the map sort of eventually laid the foundation for our transloading marketplace, because a lot of people who are short lines, they store cars, they move cars, but they also do transloading. I started with the leasing and storage marketplace. In a bear market, storage does well. In a bull market, leasing does well. So for me, it was kind of a hedge. And it was on the peripheral too. So Peter Thiel, in his book, 0 to 1, talks about when you're building a company or building a venture, you typically want to start around the fringes or the edges of that particular industry, because it's very non-threatening and it's something where not a lot of people are paying attention to. And typically that's not where the real sort of money's made. But what it does is it gets you, sort of breaks you into the industry so that you can start having those conversations with the stakeholders and constituents, because it's such a innocuous place to start and there's not a lot of people running after it. So that's why leasing and storage was kind of on the peripheral of rail. And that's when I started having conversations with the shippers, conversations with different service providers. And then, for me, it was real product-led market growth. Everything that we built was based upon what customers were telling us to build, what we were seeing in the market, where we're seeing voids. So we started with storage and leasing. Then we went to buying and selling rail cars. We had a customer come to us and said, hey, can you help us sell 1,000 cars? And then we started sort of helping to facilitate in our system the sale of used cars for scrap or for secondary use. And then we launched transloading in 2019, right before the pandemic, because it was this small little category in our services directory, which had 15 different subcategories. And it was getting 3 times more page views than any other part of our system. So our chief data scientist said, we need to take a look at this transloading thing and figure this out, because it's getting more visitors than storage, leasing, or anything else. And then when we dug into it, we figured out that transloading is the mechanism that connects all modes of transportation. And once you get into transloading, now you're getting exposure to truck, to barge, to ocean freight, to drayage, to warehouse, so all these different aspects of supply chain, which ultimately the direction we're going to go is to start to expand beyond rail and start to now offer other locations that are non-rail served into the platform.
Wow. I like that idea of starting on the edges. I have read the book, but I want to read it, because you're right. It's not, then you're not freaking anybody out by disrupting their market or their revenue source. And then you are building know, like, and trust with potential decision makers.
That's exactly right. And you're biting off a much smaller piece of the apple you're going after. And you can learn from those mistakes. When you go out, if I would have just said, hey, I'm going to go after this huge market, I'm going to, do all these amazing things. It's much harder to get buy-in on that, because there's larger market forces at hand. And if you don't understand the market dynamics, you're more likely going to run into some sort of obstacle or barrier that potentially may, kill the venture. Starting off small, working on the edges, finding product market fit in those edge cases, and then being able to sort of work your way in. It was a long journey though. I'm 9 years into this business, right? And still learning, but it took a long time. And today, we really don't have any competition as well, because it's an extremely hard thing to build. Marketplaces are probably one of the hardest business models to execute on, because you have effectively two customers. You have the supply side, which has different needs and services, and the demand side, which has different needs and services. And you have to figure out a way to get product on the shelf, but also get demand at the same time, and then continuously grow so that the product on the shelf continues to grow inventory as the demand grows. But you're serving two different customers, two different philosophies, two different motivations. So it becomes, quite complex. And that's why, you don't see a lot of marketplace businesses becoming successful in different industries. But if you look at by market cap, the 10 largest companies, in the world, they're 8 out of 10 are marketplace businesses. Look at Meta, Facebook, look at Amazon.com, look at Netflix, look at Apple. Those are all marketplace companies, right? Because all they're doing is taking an industry, bringing them into one ecosystem, and then effectively sort of making the connection, and then taking all the data behind that to create more services and products based upon data-driven analytics.
Yeah, wow. And the other thing that I caught from that and from your description here of how your company was built, because if you looked at your company now, it'd be like, holy crap, I got to boil the ocean to start this thing, like, because it's super complex. But I love that your chief data guy was watching where people were going on site. What a brilliant idea to figure out, to anticipate where the next demand is, where the interest is from potential clients.
Yeah, that's a really hard thing to do. And for software technology, you're constantly having to live in the now, but also be able to build for the future. And you're building 3-6 months, your product roadmap is 3-6 months out. So, you're effectively taking the resources you have in your company, and you're placing your bets on, numbers or black or red or 00. And you're effectively putting the future of the company based upon the functions or features that you think people are going to use. And a lot of times we built things that we thought were going to take off that didn't take off. And then we built things that we thought were just very little features or functions that could help, but actually ended up being much bigger. So I think the name of the game for building a company is just being able to iterate really, really quickly, and then have a very tight feedback loop so you can learn mistakes. The longer the feedback loop, the harder it's going to be to be able to catch the dynamics of what's going to change your decision making. So for us, it was having a very tight relationship with the supply and demand side, and gathering feedback as fast as possible, and then implementing, executing, and then recalibrating. By no means did I nail everything we built. It's been a very difficult and very long ride. Would I do it differently had I gone back and started from the very beginning? I probably would have done it a little bit differently. I probably would have built some things differently, but ultimately, I can't say I would fundamentally change anything structurally, because everything we did helped us get to where we are today. So I think ultimately we made the right decisions, but it was like going from Houston to the East Coast or the Northeast. Do we want to, go down the 10 and go south and then go up to Florida and go up to New York, or do you just want to go on a straight shot, or do you want to go up the Midwest? There's all these different routes. And that's the tough thing about entrepreneurship is you're constantly tacking, using a sailing analogy. You're tacking left and right constantly, right? And you need to know where the wind momentum is, but you're still tacking back and forth, and you're pivoting back and forth. Unless you have that flexibility and you have the ability to have changes in course. If you're very rigid on where you're going, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. But directionally, you do have to have a North Star, but ultimately, the way you get there is probably not going to be the way you thought you'd get there.
Yeah, I like that. And I've learned that from a lot of folks that I've talked to. And in fact, hey, look, anticipate where you think, go skate towards the puck, but then get it out there fast. Don't have it perfect, and get feedback immediately, because you might be headed the wrong direction. Right. And
that's right.
And it's easier to change course and not invest a whole bunch of time and money and resources into a problem that people don't really care enough to solve it. Right.
That's right. And that's where artificial intelligence is going to be a real game changer for entrepreneurs, is because before you would have to have had a significant amount of access to capital or resource to build a SaaS company, or to build a material technology company. Now with different sort of AI driven apps, you can take an idea, spin it up, and then within a day, you could launch a prototype of a software app or of an idea that you have and get quick feedback on it and then iterate and iterate. I mean, that's why you'll hear a lot of people saying that because of AI, we're going to have your first $1 billion company that is one person or potentially two people. But it's the tools, the force multiplier that you get with the leveraging of artificial intelligence really gives you this superpower that you would have never had pre-AI. So I think now is probably, I tell people this all the time, of all the times to be alive, this window of time we have between now and the next 3 to 5 years is going to be the most transformative time that we'll ever see, humankind's ever seen historically, and we'll ever see the next 500 years. So very, very fortunate to be alive during this time, because you could really make hay. If you've been failing as an entrepreneur and you haven't been able to figure out how to succeed, this is your time to go back at it and potentially build something that could be very special, even if you've never been able to succeed in the past.
That's awesome. I love the positive spin on AI and the problems that we can solve and competitive edge you can get right now. What about for your company? How does it transform your company in the future?
Yeah, so AI is really sort of at the heart of Commtrex 2.0. So Commtrex 1.0 was what you see today: marketplace, people connect, and a lot of it is happening, sort of via email or within our platform, within our system. What we're going to do with Commtrex 2.0 is we're going to build in different types of AI agents into the platform so that it can start to perform different types of activities that can help improve the visibility and also improve the ability to make better decisions. So it's going to be very valuable for both the supply and the demand side, because now they're going to have this extra sort of, capability that they didn't have before. And, ultimately, I think the future of AI is going to be very, very different than what we historically have done, or as humans have done, making decisions, right? Historically, if you need to make a decision, go to Google, 10 blue links, you're doing research. Now with ChatGPT and all the different sort of LLMs that are out there, now you ask a question and you can be very specific about what you want to learn. Now you're going to get spit back the exact results of what it is you're looking for. And you don't have to go through 10 blue links. That in itself is a real game changer, because now you, in your phone, in your pocket, you now have an extra 25 to 30 IQ points that you didn't have before. So if you know how to leverage that, it's extremely powerful, because not only is it going to save you time, but in theory, you can do deeper dives into any topic, any industry, any subject you want, without having to, have a PhD or having to pay a, high-powered service provider or subject matter expert. Everyone has the ability to walk around with that phone and pay $20 subscription and have the same access to, a PhD or expert in any given topic that you would if you're on a university campus and you had access to all these amazing people around you. Now everybody has that same access for extremely low cost. So the cost of intelligence is going to go to almost zero. Now it's a matter of what people are going to do with that intelligence to be able to monetize, all of this intellectual knowledge and property that they didn't have access to before.
Wow. All right. So tell me, what do you think is the biggest challenge for you or your business coming up in the next 5 years?
I think the biggest challenge, not only for my business, but I think for every business, is I don't think people quite understand the significant or material change that society is going to look like, or what it's going to be in the next 3 to 5 years. I think people underestimate the potential of AI and how it's going to change our day-to-day life. So my biggest challenge is, you can see around the corner, or you can think you can see around the corner, but there are certain events that happen in the history of humankind. And, I was listening to a scientist refer to this as an event horizon, to where there are certain points you get to where you just don't have the ability to see beyond a particular event, right? So in the case of an event horizon, you can't see beyond this black hole. And once you get past that, you don't know what the world's going to look like, right? So you'll hear a lot of subject matter experts talking about this world of singularity, where the world has changed so much that the world order and how we think about basic conventional sort of ways we interact with people, with resources, with objects is going to be so different, that the rules of the game have changed, and they've changed so much that you actually don't know what the world is going to function like and how you're going to function in this world 3 to 5 years down the road. So I think the biggest challenge that people have right now no matter who you are, is you can't build for the now, you have to build for the tomorrow. And you can build for the 6 months, year down the road because you can see what that potentially looks like. But I think it's extremely difficult to build for 3 to 5 years out because we really don't know how drastic society is going to be and how humans are going to change. It's just one case in point. What does the world look like where people are so integrated with ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, any of their LLMs, to where now humans are relying on AI to make decisions for them? Think about how 20-year-olds use AI. They use it for everything. They use it as an operating system. How should I break up with my girlfriend? How should I ask, this guy on a date? How should I study for a test? How should I, go attack this sort of golf tournament that I'm playing in, right? Just think about that dependency that's going to start to get created on how people make decisions. So what happens in a world where now everybody is relying on a machine or an AI to make decisions for them? So no longer are you literally speaking to a person who's making decisions based upon their own gut feelings and their history and what they've dealt with, but now you're asking them to make a decision, which is going to be ran through an AI sort of platform, and then come back and give you an answer or an action. How do you plan for that? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but that is a very real sort of use case that if AI is as ubiquitous and pervasive as people think it is, now you're going to be dealing with the world where when you go ask a girl on a date, she's going to check with her AI before she says yes or no.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. You're blowing my mind here. I hadn't thought about AI. I thought about it from the jobs perspective, from a competitive perspective, but yeah, people dependency perspective. So let me ask you this then: how do you best lead a team through a time of dramatic change?
I think that the team and the makeup of who you have in your organization is going to be completely different than how you've historically looked at hiring people. I think you have to have everyone on a team who's thinking AI first in almost every decision that they make. And let me explain what that means. If you look at any position in your company, whether it be a customer service rep, whether it be a marketing person, whether it be your lawyer, or say an operations person or a developer, every one of those people are tackling different problems on a day-to-day basis, right? So today, when people tackle problems, they're typically going to reference some sort of historical sort of framework that they've used to solve very similar problems. So it's all about pattern recognition, pattern matching, right? So people in whatever role, they're taking that problem and they're saying, okay, I've dealt with a problem like this in the past. Now, if you are now in an environment where everybody has access to this, effectively almost infinite amount of intelligence, and you have access to this, 30, 40 plus IQ points, and you're competing against a company that has AI first mentality, and everyone in that organization is leveraging AI to make them smarter and do more and work faster, you cannot continue that mental framework of relying upon how you've done things historically or relying upon past experiences to compete with people who are using AI in every part of the decision-making, every part of their org. So for me, the very fundamental thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that your organization, everybody in your team is leveling up using AI. So in everybody that you hire, from your executive assistant all the way to your chief operating officer to your marketing team, now when I'm interviewing people, one of the first questions I ask them is, how often do you use AI? How do you use it? And then when I give them a fact pattern to solve, I want them to walk me through how they're thinking about it. Like, what would be the prompt if you use AI, what would be the prompt you put in AI? Okay, all questions you would ask in AI. Okay. And then once AI gave you that problem, would you challenge AI or would you just accept it? Right. Now you're really sort of thinking about people in a much different manner, because now it's almost like everybody needs to think about having a copilot. Everyone needs to have a copilot in their job or role. So now the way I interview people is very different. And I think in order to be prepared for an AI world, you need people that are thinking about AI in every context of every aspect of their job.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And again, I what I like about you is you are really thinking about the questions you're asking to get the answers, the real answers that you need to get from a potential employee or from a potential customer. And this asking good questions is still the essence of a successful organization.
That's why I told my family it wasn't a waste of time for me to go to law school, because I spent 3 years, really sort of sharpening that sort of ability to ask questions and funnel down on everything that we look at. So the analytical skills that I built in law school are very much so used in my day-to-day as an entrepreneur. So just because I don't practice law doesn't mean that it wasn't very valuable.
Yeah.
But I now more than ever, and I think AI has proven this, that sort of, questions are the answer. AI is a 100% prompt driven. So in order for you to maximize the ability of what an AI can provide you with, you have to ask extremely specific or extremely broad questions and then be able to funnel down from those broad questions. One thing that AI can do that I don't think people realize is it will get to know you, and you can use it to ask very introspective questions. One question that I asked recently was, ask me 10 questions, one by one, about things that I may not know about myself, but will reveal things that potentially could help me become a more successful, executive. And it literally goes question by question, because I've used it so much and knows me so well. It starts off with a very broad question. What if you didn't have to? I think the first question was like, if you didn't have to worry about money, status, business, what would you focus your time in your life on? What would be the mission here? Right. And then it started to drill down from there, and ultimately took all those questions and said, here's something you don't realize about yourself. You really are driven by X. And in order to be able to accomplish that mission, these are the things that you really need to sharpen your skills at. But AI can be used even in that context, just to help you become a much more, refined executive or business person.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so tell me, what does your business look like when it's finished?
When it's finished, if we are able to accomplish and execute our goal, I think a lot more people are moving freight by rail because it's been simplified, and it's much easier to connect with providers that can help you get cars, help you get rates, help you find places to move your product to, number one. Number two, we're also helping people that are non-rail served, and we're moving to a universe where we have thousands of providers that have trained our platform all about the services and all the different resources that they provide. And now shippers have this one access point to be able to move any commodity or any container anywhere in North America, potentially anywhere in the world, just by going to one place, and they can get all their questions answered from one particular sort of ecosystem of providers and users. We have 9 years full of information and data in a repository. No one had ever really thought about creating a time capsule for rail. So since the past 6-7 years, we've been asking questions of all these railroad executives and business people and operators that had been retiring. And so when these folks are leaving their positions, there's no repository where they can leave all this information. So I thought to myself years ago, why don't we become that time capsule? Remember, in elementary school, we put a time capsule on the ground and said, in 10 years from now, you're going to pull this out and see where your life is at. So 10 years ago, when I started, or 9 years ago when I started this, I thought to myself, why don't we become the repository and ask everybody any question about the very basics and fundamentals about rail? And then eventually when AI surfaces, you can create this sort of super intelligent AI agent that can take all this information and aggregate a century plus of information and data and experience into one platform. So that's what we've been building, which, it takes time, effort, and you need to have a significant amount of people that are contributing content to a platform to do it. And that's what we effectively have built.
That's amazing. And that was a very kind of long game idea that's going to add value. That doesn't necessarily make you any money today, but it sure adds value for the long term. That was a really, I think, very visionary thing to do.
Delayed gratification. Everybody thinks that you start a business at 3 to 5 years, you're exiting for $100 million plus, but that's just not real world. That's not reality. I mean, it is real world for some people, but for majority of businesses, you don't build an idea and you're exiting it for some significant amount of money in a short amount of time. The average amount of time, and this is from a tech M&A bank that I had a workshop with 2 years ago. They said the average amount of time it takes for their tech entrepreneurs to sell a business is between 15 to 16 years. Just think about that for a moment. You have to be in the game long enough, 15 to 16 years from the inception of your idea to making money, to being able to see, and change. Over 15, 16 years, your technology is going to change significantly, but you have to iterate and pivot and move with the times enough to be able to get to a point in history or a point in time where someone wants to acquire your business because you can add, X amount of multiples in revenue or value to their business. So, 15, 16 years is more time than most people are willing to put into any activity.
Yeah. I always very simply, I didn't know that number, but that's really enlightening. I always say it's going to take twice as long. It's going to be twice as hard. It's going to take twice as much money.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. In some cases, it's going to take 3 times as much money. Nothing ever comes in at what you expect it to be. So you always have to sort of build in that extra reserve of time. But you can't change a 180-year-old industry overnight, and you got to sort of expect that it's going to take at least a decade plus to really get true buy-in. And I think that's why there's not a lot of fly-by-nights in the rail industry. If you look at any company that's become significant or material for the industry, it's taken them, several years and time to be able to get to where they're at. And it's probably no different in any other industry. It's just railroading has been around a lot longer than most industries and a lot more critical to the infrastructure of our country and any other country for that matter. So, it just takes time to get people to change with their behavior and the way they think. But once if you're able to affect that change your behavior, it's extremely powerful because, then, you're helping to shape the way, an industry sort of functions and does things.
That's awesome. Okay. Last question. When the going gets tough, how do you keep a positive mindset, or what's your kind of go-to activity when you're bumping up against a whole bunch of challenges?
It's a great question because as an entrepreneur, that happens a lot more than I'd say there are good times and things to celebrate. I think, you got to get very comfortable with failing, falling down and scraping your knees. And you got to get very good with being in situations or predicaments where you don't know if you're going to be able to make it out to the other side successfully and not give up. So what I did, there are two things that I did, and I started this about 3 to 4 years ago. Number one is I meditate regularly. I meditate every single morning for about 30 minutes. So wow. I don't start my day typically, meaning I don't start taking meetings and start getting to the thick of my day until about 9 a.m. I will typically spend like an hour to an hour and a half journaling, meditating, and I'm thinking about sort of where my day's going, things I want to do in the future, and things that I'm grateful for. And the second thing is, and I know this sounds so generic, but exercise. If I'm in a tough bind or a tough situation, the first thing I'll do is simply, go down, get my running shoes on, and then I'll go to the lake near my house and get my AirPods in, and then, either put in a music, or I put in a podcast, or I put in a meditation. And I, really have to sort of reset and say, okay, what is this problem that you're facing? How big, how much do you need to triage it? If the worst situation happened, what ultimately could really sort of fall for this? And one of my mentors said, nothing is ever as bad as you think it is, or nothing is ever good as you think it is.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
So, in both respects, no matter how bad or how good things are, I always know that I'll always get through it. And so meditating helps ground me. Exercise helps get my my blood flowing, gets my brain circulating, and sort of brings me back. And I do it outside. I'm not doing it on a treadmill inside. I'm doing it outside. So at minimum, I can be outside looking at the environment, looking at the lake and the birds, the trees, and looking at, the area I live in, and say, I'm so fortunate to have this. If everything went tomorrow, I still have my health. I still have my kids and my wife, my family. And if I have that, that's all I need. Everything can go away tomorrow, and I'll figure out a way to rebuild. But the kids, the family, your life, everything you have, your faith, those are all the things that, no matter how bad things get, if I have those things, that helps keep me grounded. It helps keep me staying positive to know that I'll get through the next day. But yeah, it's the resilience thing and the failure thing. You have to get very, very comfortable with failure, and get comfortable with the fact that if you did lose everything, everything went to zero, that you can rebuild it again, which, I have no problem. If I lost everything tomorrow, I have full confidence that I'll be able to rebuild everything that I've ever had.
Well, that is awesome. That's great advice. Thank you for that. And I would also add in, I can tell just talking to you, you definitely have a positive mindset as well. Like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
You have to, right? If you're going to run a business, you better have a positive mindset, and you better have an attitude of gratitude, because those two things together keep you in your head in the right space.
That's right. Coaches are always important. I played sports my whole life, and some of the people that have had the most impact on me or my coaches, whether it be my football coach, my golf coach, my water polo coach, any coach, even business coaches. You don't realize how much you're in your head until someone can help you get out of your head and your headspace. And sometimes you need someone who's, not your family, not your friend, not your employee, to be able to pull that out of you. So, for me, coaching has been a real big sort of impact in my life.
That's awesome, man. And I'll tell you, I mean, that's what I love about what I do, because I work with a bunch of really, really smart people that are really, really good, but sitting up in the press box versus being out on the field in the game, you just see things differently. It's a different perspective. So sometimes it's just perspective.
That's right. That's right. That's why the offensive coordinator is up in the box looking at the entire field, telling the quarterback what plays to run, or telling the defense what plays to run, is because they need to be able to zone out to that 20,000 foot level and see everything. And when you're on the field, you're very myopic and you're just looking at the next play. You're trying to read the defense, but you're not net catching all the nuances around it. And that's why having, someone that besides yourself to help you with strategy and help you execute it is so important.
Well, thank you, Martin. I thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and I know you're building something that's just going to be even more and more amazing. And just congratulations on running a successful business.
Thank you, Warren. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.
Liked what you heard? Let's make it real. Schedule your free coaching session today at sugarland.actioncoach.com.